Hi there, I'm Lillian Sparks, and I am a bereavement counselor and a hospice chaplain. And we've been talking about how to hang on to hope even when you've been through a devastating loss. Some of our previous sessions, we've talked about the different kinds of loss that you will go through in your lifetime, starting from when you were a young child until even now. How to say goodbye. That is definitely a part of life that we experience many, many times. We talked about the journey of grief and how grief is one of the hardest things you will ever do in your life. It is very hard work. We talked about giving grief a name and then asking ourselves, who am I? For grief definitely redefines who we are. We talked about the feelings of grief and all of those things that you go through during those seasons of grief. But today, this is session number 4, and we are going to talk about the stupid things that people might say to you, and then the symptoms of grief. And no, you are not crazy. This is completely normal. When you're going through grief, it's important to know that many times people are searching for the right words to try to console you or try to give you comfort. And it's not intentional, but many times our family and friends will say things to us that are very, very hurtful. And it's probably because they haven't walked our journey with us and they don't understand completely what we're going through. It reminds me of the person who said to a bereaved parent of an adopted child, well, I know it must hurt, but it's not like the child was really yours. So many times people don't even think before they speak, and they end up putting their foot in their mouth and then try to backtrack. We have to kind of let them off the hook and realize it really wasn't intentional and they really didn't mean to hurt us. Think of some of the other things that you've heard throughout your lifetime. Somebody will say, I know exactly how you feel, when they don't even have a clue. Others will say, okay, just get on with life. This is all part of it. Keep your chin up. Keep looking up. Or this is really a blessing in disguise. You will see that God has a purpose in this. I know when I went through a miscarriage, people said to me, oh, you can have other children. This isn't so bad. But every miscarriage I had was a time of grief and a process I had to go through. Other people will remind us, well, just think of everything you have to be thankful for. And then the one that really is hurtful, well, now there's another angel in heaven. Or what one lady said to me, you know, God has a garden up there, and he was looking for one more flower to put in his garden, and he took your son. And I wanted to say to her, well, he can just pick another flower. He doesn't have to take my son. Then someone will say, oh, you know, time heals all wounds. That is not true. Time is a healer, but the scar and the wound will never go away. Oh, you're strong. You can get through this. Don't cry, it's over now. Or thank God they are finally at peace. I remember about 2 or 3 weeks after my son had passed away, and I finally was able to go back to work. My desk was piled up with mail that had been accumulating. We were facing all of the holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas, and I was in charge of music, so I had all that on my plate. And I remember this lady came in to have counseling with my husband. And when she was leaving, she was walking by my doorway and she noticed me. She stuck her head in and she said, oh, hi, Pastor Lillian. Is everything just about back to normal? I didn't know what to say. I quickly said a prayer in my heart and I said, oh God, please don't let me be cruel or nasty. Give me the right words. And I looked at that lady and I said, you know, I don't think life will ever be normal again for me. And then she realized and was so apologetic. But people don't really understand sometimes, and you have to prepare yourself that sometimes things will be said and you can't let them devastate you or hurt you. What are some of the common symptoms of grief and things that you go through. I think one of the very first ones that we encounter is shock. We like are numb. We're in like a great fog, and we feel like we're a robot just going through the motions. We might feel like we're numb. And we don't know this at the time, but it really is a God-given mechanism to kind of help us get through those most painful days, the very beginning of our grief. And shock is a way that it will eventually wear off, but it is also something that helps you to get through those first few days. Another thing we might go through too also is anger. And someone that we love has been taken from us. Our whole world is turned upside down. We might be angry at God. We might be angry at the doctors or nurses or a misdiagnosis. We might be even angry at the person who died because they have left us with all these bills and this work and a house to maintain and many other unfinished tasks. And so we might be miserable and a little bit irritated and yes, angry at many different things in our life. And that can be really true. Another common reaction is guilt. We might feel guilty that they were taken and we weren't, and we're still here. And we could have our life filled with, if only I had done this, I should have. And believe me, those things can really, really get into your head and can really devastate you. We might say, if only I had told him not to go to the party, or if only I had made him stop smoking, or if only I had taken him to the doctor sooner. We might regret that we weren't a better husband, a better wife, a better mother or father, a better parent. And we can beat ourselves up and constantly feel that guilt. And that is one of those reactions that we are going to have to deal with. Another one can be anxiety or even fear. I remember one mother whose teenager died of an aneurysm. She could not sleep because she was worried about her other children, that they also could die in the middle of the night. So she was up all night, going from room to room, checking all of her other children, making sure they were still breathing, and she was overcome with fear. You can also have the reaction of relief, and that might seem strange to you, but if you've been a caregiver for many, many years, and this has consumed your life, like I took care of my Brian for 21 and a half years, 2 hours every morning, 2 hours every night, it became my life. And all of a sudden I had all this time, and you might actually feel a sense of relief or like a burden has been lifted off your shoulders. And it's hard to be able to deal with that. And you might have all this extra time that you were once a caregiver and now you don't know what to do with yourself. I remember I had those hours every night between like 8 and 10 o'clock, and I didn't know what to do. So I decided I would take flute lessons, and I would practice every night between 8 and 10 o'clock. And I know my whole family was praying every day that I would give up that flute. But that was my way of getting through that time that I felt such a relief. Another feeling that you might go through too, it might also be, besides anxiety and relief, can also be that you are consumed with thoughts and it affects you mentally. I remember one time when our daughter Leanne was a senior in high school, she had a summer job. It was a terrible storm one night. We didn't have cell phones. There was no way for us to keep in touch. And she didn't come home. It was midnight. It was 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. My husband and I were sitting up waiting for her. And finally she came through the front door. And I mean, we were overcome with relief, and it was mixed in with anger and some resentment and guilt and a whole bunch of things, a whole big ball of wax. So a lot of those things can hit you all at one time. The physical sensations, like those mental things that you may go through, you may feel lack of energy and constant fatigue. You may feel like you can't finish a project, and you try to do things, but you just get started and you just give up easily. And that's very understandable. All these reactions are normal. And then you might have an inability to concentrate. You might start a sentence and then can't finish it. Or you're telling a story or a joke and you can't remember the ending. And people talk about even maybe hearing the footsteps of their loved one or smelling their cologne or perfume. And it reminds you of them. And that is all really normal. I remember my husband for months would stand outside of our Astro van waiting for Brian to get out of the back seat because he was had a disability and he didn't have fingers. He couldn't close the door. So my husband would always wait for him. And he was the last one to get out of our car. And he would be standing there and all the rest of us would be in the house. And I turn around and go, "Where's Dad?" And they say, "He's still waiting for Brian to get out of the car." And those routines and those parts of your life are very difficult to be able to move on and to change your pattern of behavior. There are also behavioral changes. You may feel like you need to be with family, or you just want to be completely alone and you don't want to go to the party, or you don't want to be at the reunion or the family get together, and you just want to go in a room and close the door and be totally by yourself. Those are understandable. I have said it several times, but grief is the hardest work you will ever do in your life. It does take time, and you have to be easy on yourself and give yourself room to be able to grieve. The last thing I want to mention as we close today is that it can affect us spiritually. Grief will be the hardest test of your faith that you will ever walk through. Things that you have always believed in, you may doubt them. You may wonder if God is fair, if he really is there, if he's really listening, if he knows what you're going through. And it can be really difficult when you realize that God didn't answer your prayer in the way you had thought. And those things are crucial in your life. But I can tell you that God will be there for you. And to go back to the things that you know where you found God, go back to a place of prayer, or perhaps read the Word of God or your Bible or a devotional, or talk to someone who you know has been a mentor to you and can encourage you. I remember 2 weeks before Brian passed away, my husband asked me to meet him at a Presbyterian church that was close to our house. And when I pulled up in the driveway, I saw that my husband was standing in a cemetery. And I realized he was there to pick out a place for our son to be buried. I was so angry at him. I was so overwhelmed with emotion that when I drove away that day, I had to pull over to the side of the road to wipe away the tears. And I sat there for the longest time questioning my faith. And I remember just as clear as I'm sitting here today, God said to me, and he asked me this question: if I take your son to heaven, will you still believe in me? That was a heart-searching question. And after a few minutes, I said, yes, God, I will still believe in you. And I can say to you today that I know after all these years of going through this journey of grief, God has been there for me every step of the way, and he will be there for you. God bless you. Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you in the next session.